Hello, welcome to the Right Perspective Podcast, Interview Edition. My name is Benjamin Davis. I'll be your host, and I'm here joined today by Caleb Galloway with Galloway Woodworks. How you doing, Caleb?
I'm doing good, Ben. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. We're talking about the death of beauty in the West and what we can do about it. It's kind of been epitomized by the millennial gray, excuse me, the
Yeah.
millennial gray that people are talking about. And you and I just had a conversation with a guy on Twitter about why it'd be nice for refrigerators to be pretty.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's all kind of in the same vein. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
why is that kind of small detail in our life
Yeah.
being beautiful important?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is kind of just the commercialization and like private equitization of everything. The the thing is like everything's gray, not because a lot of people love gray. Most people don't really care for gray, but if you do it like hot rod red, some people love hot rod red. But a lot of people don't care for that at all. And the same is true with any other kind of more loved color. There'll always be the other side that doesn't like it at all. So in order to just sell as many as humanly possible, there's this push to just move everything to this sort of neutral middle of whites and grays and very little else. And I think that that's really just the byproduct of just having these giant commercial businesses that produce 90% of everything we purchase. There's not a super easy fix to it other than just to be really, really intent with voting with your dollar. If like, I'm going to buy the thing that isn't the boring gray thing. Yeah. Yeah, but that would
So
be,
if I'm a builder or even a
yeah,
house flipper, I'm just going to paint everything a color that everybody will be okay with, they could live
yeah,
with, and they can adjust it later if they want to. Okay, that makes
yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah. It's a hard, it, at that level, it's a difficult issue to fix. But I think that, kind of the boots on the ground, smaller guys can do a lot of just like, find find the one little thing that you can build, that might be a refrigerator, that might be a table, anything like that. Just find the one thing you can build. And kind of the biggest, it's really unfortunate at like the grand scale, but at the smaller scale, to anyone who wants to build things, it actually is a huge advantage because functionally, I really don't have to compete with the big guys. Like the people who are going to shop at IKEA, who are going to shop at, kind of the big box stores for furniture, are never going to even consider me. But there's this huge population of people that don't really want to do that and would look into, commissioning custom work and that kind of thing, and will pay top dollar for it as a result. So there is a kind of a big kind of upside there of, if you, knuckle down and figure out how to build, your one little thing, there's a huge kind of niche market for that kind of stuff.
Well, I agree with you, but before we get into
Yeah.
solutions, let's talk about the
Yeah.
problem a little bit. We're so far
Oh yeah.
removed from when people would uh, do all the little details and make everything beautiful. We're so far removed from
Oh
that.
yeah.
Uh, a lot of people don't understand why it's a table. It's for setting things on. It's a
Yeah.
refrigerator. It's for keeping things cold. It's not for beauty. What?
Right.
Why is everyday beauty important? Why should people care?
Mm. I think a lot of it just boils down to the fact that just, you know, having beautiful things and building beautiful things is just fundamentally just a natural, like, moral good. Um, there's John Ruskin. He's a architecture. He was an art critic in kind of early or late 1800s England, and he had this whole. He wrote several treatises on beauty, and he wrote several really good works on architecture. Seven Lamps of Architecture is some of his best work. It's really fantastic. But one of the points in there that he makes is that, like, part of the consideration of beauty is the joy that the craftsman took in creating it. And I think there's a
Mm.
lot of that with a lot of this sort of more, um, mass-produced work is like you can't really tell where the human hand was involved, if at all. And I think having just sort of a thing that's like, you can tell roughly like, where the chisel marks are laid, where the saw marks are. Like, having like those small details of just it makes a thing just feel naturally real. Like you have an understanding like this is like a real object that didn't just sort of materialize out of the ether into an IKEA store, but it just kind of but it's like this was, there was a legitimate amount of work and struggle that someone put into bringing this thing into existence. I think there's just a natural moral good in that. That's almost self-evident at the end of the day.
One of the best pieces of furniture in my house is my corner desk, which my grandpa
Oh,
made.
oh, that's
He
awesome.
used it. He's a good worker, good woodworker. He's kind of a jack of all trades. He can do anything.
Oh yeah.
But I was noticing the other day that the shelves on the top of the desk, it's
Mhm.
not. He didn't just put some hardware in there and set a piece of board on there. He
Yeah,
like cut out a groove on
awesome.
each side and slid the wood. And I
Yeah,
think I can see where maybe he put some pegs in there or something to keep it on. But it's
yeah.
really cool. It's dark wood.
Oh
It's
yeah,
nice.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think having that beauty around us really, I think it really improves our lives. Just
Oh,
um,
absolutely. Yeah,
why else would God have made nature so beautiful?
exactly. Yeah,
Points to our Creator. Yeah,
yeah.
and
Definitely.
I would not have thought of it from I guess the craftsman side, but that's where you're at. And I forgot to let you
Yeah,
introduce yourself. What do you
yeah,
do? Who are you?
yeah.
Let's get back to that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm a carpenter by trade, but I've bounced around done a lot of things. My craftsman experience really started doing pottery back in high school, and then from there I went into college for architecture, which I'm still working through. But and while I was in the architecture school, they had a really nice wood shop down in their basement. So just from that, I kind of started to play around with it, experiment with things, and one thing led to another. I ended up doing a big relief piece for a church out in California. They needed a relief piece. I needed, someone to pay for wood. So I just reached out. I was like, hey, in fact, I can carve this for you. If you guys don't mind covering materials, I just want a chance to play with it. And that went really well. And the priest had been kind of retweeting anything I posted about it on Twitter. And one thing led to another. I got that shipped off, and then my priest, he had like sort of heard that there was that I'd done something for church out in California, but didn't know any details. But at one point, there was the church basement needed to be redecorated. It needed to be painted. And it was just kind of an old church basement. They're kind of converting it into office space. And I just reached out. I was like, hey, like if you guys want to do some carving stuff up in there, you let me know, and send him some pictures. And he just responded with the words, call me. And we ended up doing a really large relief piece that's now behind the altar in my church. But just that was kind of how I got my start. But since then, I've done stained glass as well. I hope to pick up blacksmithing pretty soon. And my main focus is really on doing liturgical work, but I do secular work kind of on and off as is needed financially. But yeah.
Sounds good. You make some really beautiful pieces.
Oh yeah,
I love
thank you.
seeing the pictures you post. Really,
Yeah, for
really cool.
sure.
So
So,
beauty is important. It makes our lives better. It
oh yeah,
points us to the Creator. I think. Um,
absolutely.
why why did we stop making things beautiful? It's not
Yeah.
just houses. It's everything. Why?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of just kind of social things you can point to, but I think a significant amount of it is that things have gotten very delocalized, kind of as I mentioned before with, it's, just monetarily, it doesn't having, very custom, very complex pieces. You're not going to sell the same like amount if it's just that. If you do it fancier, you necessarily get forced into a more niche market. But I think part of it's just that. It's just, the market at play. But a lot of it too is just that we've sort of lost any kind of like larger desire to like strive for something past just make the GDP go up. And I think that's a lot of it is there's kind of this line go up mentality for the past 50 years or so that kind of has disregarded beauty as a thing that's not like absolutely fundamental to human nature. And I think it's a combination of that and then just kind of modernism in the design world has become like incredibly ubiquitous. That's just what everyone is just assumed to be the thing. Being in architecture school for coming up on 4 years now, the professors are very insistent on modernism as the weirdest thing is that they won't just make like a clear argument that here's why modernism is good. There's just the assumption that it naturally is good, and any sort of traditionalist idea is this sort of like weird bygone thing of 100 years ago that could never ever be done today, which has led to a lot of. I've been cussed out by several professors. I'm incredibly proud of that. But I think a lot of it is that the modernist viewpoint kind of sees beauty as this sort of like gaudy, needless thing, and that we should just sort of strip everything down to the nuts and bolts, the basic materials, and like just the form alone is all you need. And then the traditionalist response is that the form is like, that's an important part of it, especially in the architectural world. But but beauty has such a natural value that there needs to be a degree of just sacrificing money and time and material into just making a pretty little widget to put above the door. And, you need to have that sort of mentality of like, the beauty is such a absolute moral good that we will sacrifice a non-insignificant amount of money and time into just making it look right. Just purely on the basis that is the morally correct thing to do, and to not do that is in some ways like very, very close, if not just a sin. And I think we've kind of just moved very far away from that into it's just kind of beauty's nice, but it's just strictly optional and you don't actually need it. And I think that we have to move much stronger the direction of it's an absolute moral good that's like equal to, into like owning a home. Owning a home is an absolute moral good. That home being beautiful is also an absolute moral good.
Do you think that has anything to do with the depression rates in the U.S. right now?
Oh, it totally does. I think, I forget who it was, but someone on Twitter coined the term SSRI chic to describe like millennial gray type stuff. And I think a significant amount of it is that, and there's also a study out of England that showed a very strong, you can correlate suicide rates and the styles of architecture. So areas with like hyper-modernist, like Bauhaus style architecture have a measurably higher suicide rate than more traditionalist areas. That's not the cleanest study in the world because there's a lot of other factors in that. But I think like that's a correlation that's significantly notable in the fact that like, just the fact that those things can be correlated at all, it goes to show something. But I think that kind of depression is part of it. But I also think just like a larger idea of like, we've lost the idea that a building should actually last. So kind of a great statistic on this is, do you know what the lifespan of reinforced concrete is?
30 years? 50 years?
75. 75 to 100, give or take.
I have no idea.
But 75 to 100, which is not a long time. In the history of building things, like if you do a wood structure, you're looking at 300 years, if potentially much longer if you upkeep it well and replace broken elements, or rotting elements. And then like stonework can last theoretically indefinitely. We have there's not the Colosseum, but there's a smaller Colosseum on the outskirts of Rome that's actually still in use. It got turned into a soccer stadium now, but it was built as a Roman Colosseum, like under the Roman Empire, and then was turned into a soccer stadium. It's been continuously in use since like the 4th or 5th century. So there's a lot of that of just, we've lost this idea that like, it used to be that you would build a building and the person building that building would expect that not only would their children see it, but their grandchildren, their great-great-great-grandchildren would see it. And I think that's something that you really have to bring back. There's a fantastic quote by Ruskin on that.
Now, so that ties into the loss of legacy-mindedness I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Oh, yeah.
You don't care what happens to the next generation. That's...
I think that's, that's the biggest like kind of socio-political issue. A ton of problems just tie into the fact that a significant number of people just have this mentality of, well, I'll be dead, it doesn't matter. And I think that you see that in immigration discussion, in beauty, almost every issue. A significant amount of it is just that I'll be dead, it doesn't matter. The kids can handle it. And I think that's a huge issue to deal with. That Ruskin quote, though, if you don't mind me reading it, is when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, nor for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for, and let us think, as we lay stone upon stone, that a time is to come when these stones will be held sacred, because our hands have touched them, and men will say, as they look upon the labor and wrought substance of them, see, this our forefathers did for us.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. But I think
Good
that's
stuff.
I think that's the mentality you have to bring back of, at some point what we do will be held sacred or will be reviled by our grandchildren and great grandchildren, if we don't really hard push for the future of figuring out how can we actually leave the world a better place.
And I think we're getting back to that a little bit as a culture, especially with Gen Z.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah, I think Gen Z is. I have a lot of hope for Gen Z, especially kind of the young men, and I think there's also a lot of clear problems. The most interesting thing politically with Gen Z is that the young right is in a lot of ways post-conservative, because like millennials, the millennials that were conservative, they had like a memory of when they were like when home ownership and strong family structure and those kind of things were just the norm. And I think it wasn't the case for me. I think I kind of got lucky and grew up with a really great family. But I think for a lot of Gen Z, they don't have a good memory of anything that was worth conserving. So I think they're especially with young men on the right, they're not looking for some like grand, they're not thinking, well, here's this grand thing that we must save. They're thinking there's this vague myth that at some point things were better, but somebody took it from us, and everything's going to burn down. But maybe we can find the guy that did it and we can hang him. And I think there's very little thought past that of just, I think that Gen Z is, the young right has become incredibly concerned with building gallows when they should be building churches. And I think that's a lot of what it boils down to with the young right, is that they're very, very focused on, how can we get ahead on a pike and not how can we build something that's worth conserving in the first place.
Yeah. And I think some of those things can go together when you take that, like, okay, the things that the previous generations at least said they were trying to conserve are gone. So now we need to rebuild and get back to that. So it's less of a let's protect the castle. It's Reconquista.
It's you have to rebuild.
Take back, rebuild.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's good. Oh, we need to get back. We need to take back beauty. We need to start building that again. We were talking about right before we turned on the video about Trump's Independence Arch. What did I say?
Yeah.
Victory Arch.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I don't.
What do you think of Trump's overall pursuit of more classical architecture?
I think that I appreciate the push for beauty. I think that's a great thing. I think his particular style of it is something I just don't have a good taste for. It strikes me as kind of very gaudy and sort of pasted on, if that makes sense. The sort of thing that's like cardboard model. It's not. It doesn't have a very strong sense of realism to it. There's a lot of white plaster and stick-on linoleum that looks like marble and a lot of gilding. And I think that while it's great that we're moving away from modernism, that's like an absolutely fantastic thing. I'm a huge fan of this administration doing that. I wish there'd be a greater push towards, we're going to build things out of gray stone and solid wood, and a little bit less of the plaster and the fake gild. But the arch overall, I'm excited about, and I look forward to seeing how that comes together. It'll be interesting to see who gets the contract to build it. That's probably one of the most interesting things to see.
Good. Is it Orthodox Mason, to bid for it?
I mean, it would be great if they did. I've worked with them a little bit over last summer, and they do some fantastic work. Honestly, my hope would be that Monumental Labs gets their hands on it. They do CNC stone carving, and they have some really fantastic machines that can do just really incredible things. They're kind of on the cutting edge of moving back into. There's sort of a new in the design world. There's kind of this new push towards like a techno traditionalism of like, there's these great beautiful things that used to be built, and there is a legitimate economic issue in figuring out how do we do that. Like, how do you build a building that has a stone statue out front, and fancy carved brackets and all that sort of thing. That there's the economic issue. There is that labor costs are significantly higher than they used to be. Um, so you do have to find a way to figure out how to mitigate that, and part of that is moving towards CNC machines, which are just robots that can carve things, basically. And Monumental Labs has several of them. They've done several really big statues, and they do some really incredible work. But they'd definitely be my vote for a project like that.
Okay. I hadn't heard of them. That sounds pretty cool. So combining real materials with real beautiful designs, but
Yeah,
robot carved instead of
yeah,
200 years of
yeah,
generations of stonemasons and stuff.
yeah. Well, yeah, and they do a very good job of balancing it because
Mhm.
with a stone carving on a CNC, you have an issue with jitter. So because you're carving a very hard material and you're carving it very slowly, that motor is going to vibrate. So you can only like rough things out. All the fine detail still has to be done by hand. So what they do is they take their block of stone, instead of having a master stonemason spend weeks cutting it down to the basic shape. They cut the basic shape out in 16 hours on the CNC, and then over several weeks, and a real master mason will finish the project. And I think that's a great way to balance the you still have the skill and the craftsmanship there. You just kind of cut out as much of the kind of getting to the finishing line. You just cut out a lot of that kind of beginning section, which is just a really great thing to be able to do in order to move forward traditionalism.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I want to move on from that a little bit and get to what can we personally do. I've been seeing these things on these reels, these people
Mhm.
like, totally getting rid of the millennial gray and adding the maximalism, the big
Yes.
mirrors, the walls of pictures, and I was think
Yes.
I found that small steps. I found you can get face plates that look really cool for your light
Oh
switches
yeah.
and stuff,
Yeah, those
but
are awesome.
they're really expensive. My wife
Yeah.
suggested we could get contact paper and at least make them beautiful.
Yeah.
So we may try that. Uh,
Very nice.
but what can we do? Small steps start making our houses, our surroundings more beautiful.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, finding like, I think there's a lot of very creative people out there that just need like a little bit of a push to get there. I was kind of one of those people for years. And I think especially my priest kind of pushed me along into doing more craft work for the church itself. And then I kind of, very quickly took off running from there. But I think a lot of it is just figuring out, like what's the small, little drop in the bucket that you can do, if that's, carving wood, hammering on metal, anything like that is just, find the one craft that you're really, really skilled at, or that you have talent at, and become really, really skilled at it. Yeah. And I think that's the first step. And then also is taking like a really, really strong focus on the church. Like, decorating your own home is fantastic, and there's so many ways to do that. Wallpaper and paintings and all that is fantastic. But I think that also taking a really strong focus on making the church itself beautiful um, is a really influential way to do that, because any work that you do that is displayed in the church, that makes the church more beautiful, will be seen by a lot of people, and there's a lot of kind of small influences that can move the needle in the right direction.
Good stuff. And for people like me who working with
Yeah,
building anything with my hands, that's that's kind of
yeah,
off the table. But
yeah.
I can go to Goodwill, and we found this. I don't know if you saw.
Oh
I
yeah.
posted a picture of it. Just a little picture. It
Mhm.
looks like a Christopher Robin or something. Just a nice sketch.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that has greatly improved the look of our dining room, hanging
Oh
that
yeah.
on the wall. And then, of course, adding a Galloway Woodworks cutting board to our
Yeah,
counter. So
yeah, that was a great project. Yeah.
good stuff. Okay. Well, there's things we can do. We know why it's important. Um,
Yeah.
for anybody who's not convinced yet, can you speak any more to why it's important, why it improves your life?
Hmm. I think I've said mostly all there is to say on it. I think, I'm trying to think how to word it. I think a lot of it is just that the simple reality is like at the end of the day, you're going to enjoy a more beautiful space than you are a plain one. Like I think that's kind of the very obvious thing. And I think the design world is very intent on beating that out of just about everyone. Um, the but I think a lot of it's just like, at the end of the day, it's like a aquarium. Like if you put a fish in a plain aquarium with like a little bit of gravel on the bottom and nothing else, that fish is going to die very quick.
Yeah.
But if you put a little bit of coral, give him a nice little rock to sleep under, that fish will live a much longer, much happier life. And at the end of the day, it's a very similar situation for us. So, you do need to decorate your house in the same way that you do need to decorate your fish tank. Um, and I think a lot of it is just that. And then also, I think, especially for people who have spent time in architecture school in the design world and are just, totally convinced of modernism, I would like think back to how you were in your first year of architecture school. Like, was Corbusier and Louis Kahn, were they always the did an unpainted, unfinished concrete wall always look that good, or have you been forced in that direction by what gave you a good grade? There's a great study they did, I think 2003, I think, but it was they had they had two bodies of students. One were architecture students freshman year, and one was a body of various other students, engineers, biology, nursing, whatever. And they started them both in the freshman year, and then just followed them as they went through. And they at the end of every semester, they have them take this really simple test. They show them like 20 buildings and just say rank these buildings 1 through 20. Um, at the first year, there was no meaningful difference between the two bodies of students. Both would rank the more complex, more traditionalist building at the top, and the most modernist, kind of brutalist Louis Kahn sort of thing at the very bottom. But then as you went through, at the very end, the two lists were almost the exact inverse. So the bottom ranked brutalist building, the brutalist building was the absolute lowest rank for your general students, and then for your architecture students, it was the top, and the same and vice versa for the traditionalist building. And that's it's just a really really damning thing of how the design academic world works, is that it very aggressively forces students into this sort of weird little bubble of you have to do the modernist thing, the brutalist thing, the whatever isn't traditional, you have to do that, or professors will just straight up tell you you're not going to pass this class unless you do it. And I've been told that. I have great stories of fighting with professors. But a lot of it is just that the and that's another great way to fix it, is there needs to be a greater push in the conservative world and in the traditionalist world of figuring out how can we reach these students who do have a traditionalist bent. The majority of students are going to have a greater interest in like the Cathedral of Cologne than they are in any of Corbusier's work. He was a French architect who he was a huge fan of a plain concrete wall and nothing else. I'm fully convinced he was demon possessed. But I think that if we could find a way to reach those students who maybe not in the first year, but in the second year of their studies, in the second semester of their studies, and just be like, here's a scholarship, and the condition for the scholarship is you have to design a traditionalist building, or do some level of traditionalist work and show that to us. And if it is traditionalist enough, will you renew your scholarship for next semester? And I think just doing that at even a small level could do a huge amount to just push the needle in the right direction. Because right now there's, especially in architecture, there's only two traditionalist architecture schools in the country, which are Notre Dame and Catholic University, or at least those are the only two I know of, and I've done a fair amount of looking. So I think that finding a way to have just a little bit more support for those kind of people could do a lot. And in my case, I'm in fourth year, and at this point, everyone is either, incredibly stubborn or I've gotten it beaten out of them. But if you can reach those students who are in the second year, and are kind of just at the beginning of getting pushed in the wrong direction, those guys could very easily be helped just a tiny bit and could be kind of convinced to hold to a more traditionalist aesthetic all the way through. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds like a good way somebody with a bunch of money could make a real difference on that end, offering those scholarships. That's good.
Oh, definitely.
Um, do do you think having that beauty around you also
Mhm.
um, is inspiration to pursue excellence in
Oh,
the rest of your
absolutely.
life?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think that's, it's sort of, a Jordan Peterson type thing of, make your bed, but at the end of the day, I think it is much, much easier to accept kind of, kind of a lower existence and a lower level of workmanship across your entire life. If you're in a less beautiful home, it's, kind of, a broken window theory sort of thing. A building with a broken window, there's a measurably more crime and vandalism will happen to and around that building, compared to a building with nice windows, just because, you know, any space that's well taken care of, especially in the, in the public sphere. So, your train stations, your bus stops, civic buildings, that kind of thing. If those buildings are beautiful and well taken care of, it will have a significant effect on just forcing people into the mindset of like someone cares enough about this building to maintain it and to keep it clean, and people will adjust their behavior accordingly. So I think there's a huge, huge social benefit to having beautiful spaces, both, within your own home as a way to encourage, yourself and your family, but also within, the public sphere as well.
It's good stuff. I think that speaks to that balance between lately people have been talking about the rugged individualism versus the warmth of
Yes.
collectivism, as Zoran
Yeah.
Mamdani said.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's a little bit of a false dichotomy. You do need a little bit of individualism, but I think a lot of the aesthetic issues on the right do come from that hyper individualism of, I'm the only one that matters. So, my table can be, a couple of crates stacked on top of each other, and that's just fine. And it is. I've had a good crate table for many years, but you do have a moral responsibility to the greater world of like, not only just out of, basic human decency, but also it's a fantastic way to convince people of your values. I think a lot of Gen Z sort of political memes are like this. You see, like the left is a lot of like left propaganda is probably a better term, but a lot of the left's propaganda is very heavily focused towards, convincing you of an idea of like some sort of truth statement, and then the right, it'll be like some sort of very, semi-bizarre edit that's basically just like, hey, this is a cool vibe. And there's not any real meat behind it, but it is like astonishingly convincing in a very bizarre way. There's I think it was a DHS account on Twitter who posted, it was a picture of an old like red farm truck with a glass bottle of Coca-Cola on the fender. And the caption was just like, "We're going to save America" or something like that. And some liberal responded to it and it's like, what is this even supposed to be? Like, is this for like a middle schooler? Is it for a child? Like, this means, nothing, but everyone apparently loves it. And I think at the end of the day, it just shows it's like, there's plenty of things I disagree with the current administration about, but they like old red trucks and they like Coca-Cola, and that goes to show something. Like, at least we agree on that. And I think that the right has a huge upside in that they're much better poised to honestly pursue a more traditionalist aesthetic. And I think Trump is starting to tap into that. But that's become, incredibly popular across the political aisle. But it's the modernism and minimalism are still a very sort of leftist coded idea. And I think that if the right just latches on even just a little bit to, we're going to make beautiful public spaces, we're going to be, Art Deco or Art Nouveau or Gothic or however you like, just tapping into that a little bit more of like, the public sphere does actually matter. Like, yes, I love the rugged collectivism and, doing everything solo and running my own business. But at the end of the day, we are a country that has a lot of people in it, and we're going to have to find a way to reach and to get along with all those people. And beauty is a fantastic way to do that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, Caleb, I appreciate it. Where can people see pictures of your work and maybe buy some of it? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on both Instagram and Twitter. That's really all am right now. If I was a good businessman, I'd have more socials, but I dislike social media just on principle. I've been horribly trapped in this situation of despising social media, but it also being my primary source of income. But uh, Twitter and Instagram, my tag is just Galloway Woodworks or Gallo_Woodworks. But you can see a lot of pictures of my stuff there, and I'm open to any kind of smaller commission. But my bigger commissions are closed right now, as I'm working on a variety of projects. But yeah.
Okay. Ha-
Yep.
Have you got your website almost up?
We're just about to. The website, the main purpose for the website is to sell roadside shrines, which is kind of the bigger project I'm working on right now. But I'm waiting for a buddy of mine to finish the last piece of it, so that we can assemble one and put it together and take lots of good pictures of it. But as soon as those pictures are done, the website will be up and online. But yeah.
Do you have the domain name yet that people can search for soon, or not yet?
Not yet, but
Okay.
soon. Yeah.
Well, we'll watch for that. Okay. Well, Caleb, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Yeah, for sure.
You have a great evening.
All right. You too. Bye.
Bye.